people say a lot of the time the market's saturated. I don't know how I'm going to get clients. How do you be a top 1% practitioner in 2024?
I remember seeing some stat during COVID where they spent over £2 billion on out-of-date PPE. Is a one-day course going to make you a good aesthetic practitioner?
Oh, hell no.
Right, cool.
Hell
Not
no.
that controversial then, cool. I'm glad you mentioned that.
The NHS doesn't always get the credit it deserves. For example, my sister, when she was born, she had a hole in her heart, right? She had to have like surgery, have a pacemaker put in, and the NHS for her have saved her life.
The most I've ever spent for a training course is £2,500, one-day training course. And I felt like I got my money's worth. I find that hilarious that people are doing advertisements for medical treatment saying that if you train with us, you can drive a Lamborghini, you can fly an helicopter. I think it's wild. A bit controversial me saying this, but pharmaceutical companies don't care who's buying the product as long as someone's buying.
BBLs, Brazilian booty lifts. The bad press around this treatment inside the last 6 months has been crazy. Do you think maybe like it's just a treatment that shouldn't be offered? Hey, and welcome to another episode of the Harvey Warrington Media Aesthetics Podcast. Now, today we've got a very special guest, a personal friend of mine, a valued client, and someone who's absolutely smashing it in the aesthetics industry. He's a trainer for one of the most prestigious academies in the world with 7 locations, Derma Medical, and has a very successful practice of his own based in Surrey. Dr. Haroon Ashraf. How you doing, my man?
Very good. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming on. You know,
how are you?
Yeah, I'm good, man. I'm good. I'm always good. Always good. A lot of exciting things happening and excited to have a fire conversation with you today.
Amazing.
It's funny because whenever we actually do talk on the phone, we always say like, bro, we should just record this because it's like a great podcast in itself, right?
Yeah.
So obviously you've been in the aesthetics industry for a good number of years now. You know, you went through medical school, university, and I know you've seen the industry change quite a lot in the last few years. Like, what's your experience been inside the last sort of 6 months with aesthetics, you know, being a practitioner, training for Derma Medical? What's been your journey over the past 6-12 months?
Yeah, 6 to 12 months. I'll be honest, not too different from the previous 2 to 3 years, just on a slightly bigger scale. So I think we started working together maybe 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago. We started incorporating some high level marketing in with the aesthetics as well. So over the last, I'd say, 6 to 12 months, more of the same, just a lot busier. So I don't really have much time off, but doing lots of training, doing lots of clinics just day to day. And then also trying to build the marketing side of things as well, which you guys have helped me quite a lot with. So I appreciate that.
Of course. I mean, you being a great face of the brand always helps, you know. And I've got to say, for someone that's in business, your hairline is still hairline.
Yeah, you know what? I'm blessed. I'm blessed when it comes to the hairline. Yeah, no hair transplants for me anytime soon.
My man. It's always a good thing. Me and Luke are going, man. Our hairline's going. I actually booked in a transplant for next year.
Serious?
Yeah, it's just the way the hair's styled, you can't really see it.
Okay.
If the wind blows, it's kind of, you know.
Have you tried PRP?
I've been recommended it actually by a couple of clients, but I just thought, you know, I've got a client that's a doctor up north. I'm just going to get him to do it for me. He's sorting me out with it.
Yeah.
So let's talk regulations, okay?
Cool.
I know that's something that is huge within the industry right now. Everyone's talking about regulations. No one really knows quite what's going to happen. But regulations, you know, they are coming. I've got some stats here. You know, let's talk about the stats for regulations. Now, if you actually look at the world of aesthetics, the USA is regulated. The majority of Europe, regulated. The UAE, Dubai, regulated. Canada's regulated. It seems like the UK is the only place that isn't regulated. Why do you think this is? And what's your take on this?
I mean, what you said is very interesting. You go to pretty much any other country in the world, there's at least an element of regulation. Most countries only allow doctors, dentists, nurses to do these aesthetic medical treatments. Unfortunately, in the UK, we're in this very weird situation where anyone can do this treatment. After this podcast, you can do my Botox, and there's no law that's stopping you from doing that, which is quite wild. And you go down the rabbit hole of why. Why hasn't the UK adopted some form of regulation? And as I started going down this, I guess, rabbit hole, you kind of realize who's benefiting from there not being regulation. And I'm sure you'll probably agree with me, certainly the patients aren't benefiting from people with minimal to no medical background doing these treatments. So in the UK, as a medical professional, you can obtain your products from pharmaceutical companies, but the same pharmaceutical companies are selling to non-medical practitioners as well. You don't really need a qualification to buy any sort of dermal fillers. With Botox, it's slightly different because it's a prescription medication. In order to administer it, you need a prescriber, doctor, nurse, dentist to administer, order these products. But then anyone can administer it, which is a little bit strange in that regards. So what I found is a bit controversial me saying this, but pharmaceutical companies don't care who's buying the product as long as someone's buying. So you see non-medical professionals buying, quite a lot of these products, which is beneficial to the pharmaceutical company because they're making more money. They're not really too fussed about who buys as long as someone's buying. And then again, you go down other people that could regulate it, because if the pharmaceutical companies wanted to regulate it, they can just put a blanket rule: only doctors, dentists, nurses, or other medical professionals can buy these products, and it fixes the problem of regulation almost overnight. But the other person or organization that could regulate aesthetics is the government. So why hasn't the government come in? They always flirt with the idea. Every couple of years they say, yeah, there's going to be some regulation, and then it almost goes quiet. And I've only been in the industry for about 6 years, and even in this 6 years, there's probably been about 2, maybe 3 occasions where we really thought regulation was going to come. I'm quite fortunate to be in contact with people that have been in the industry for decade and a half, so 15 years, and they say the same thing. They flirt with the idea of regulation, and then it kind of falls on deaf ears and no one speaks about it. So as medical professionals, a lot of the treatments that we do are categorized as medical treatments. Therefore, the tax around the treatments is slightly different. For a medical treatment, you are technically exempt of VAT because it's a medical treatment, whereas someone who is not a medical professional can do exactly the same treatment, and they now have to pay VAT.
So the government's getting that 20%.
They're getting their 20%, right? So that's why, in my opinion, the government hasn't rushed to regulate it, because there are a lot of non-medics that are doing these treatments. They're buying these products. They have to pay VAT on the products. When they do the treatments, as long as they're above the threshold, then they have to pay 20% to the government. So they're the two main entities that can quite easily regulate it. I don't think it'll be that difficult, but I'm assuming the reason behind why regulation hasn't come in so quick is because of
Profit,
financial benefits.
It's a really interesting view, and it's a view that I haven't ever had a conversation with anybody about before, but it makes so much sense. Like, it's not the first time pharmaceuticals have been profit focused over health and safety focused, right? So I guess the question would be, if the rest of the world see this as something that should be regulated, what's different about the UK? Do you feel it's just simply, Tories or the pharmaceutical companies that are just focusing on the profit? Like, you think that's the main thing here? Because it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I think that's certainly one of the biggest factors. I'll be honest, I think it's just one of these things that were overlooked initially, and then people started to realize, oh, we can make a decent amount of tax money from this, or pharmaceutical companies are selling a lot more product in the UK than some other countries, maybe. But I think it was something that just wasn't regulated in the past, and then it's just been pushed back and back and back and back. I think the other thing, which is almost somewhat of a benefit, is these treatments are medical treatments. They can have some consequences, but a lot of the consequences from these treatments aren't life-threatening. Not all of them. There have been cases where it can be, I don't want to say deadly, but definitely adverse to health if these treatments were done incorrectly. But generally speaking, no one's died, from my understanding, of aesthetic treatments, which is a good thing because it lets you know that these treatments are quite safe, even in untrained hands. However, I think from cosmetic outcomes, patients do suffer. If someone has been doing, let's just say, teardrop filler for a month versus someone who's been doing it for 10 years, the cosmetic outcome is going to be wildly different, even though both the treatments were carried out relatively safely. So yeah, my understanding is that it was just overlooked because no one's died from it, because no one's had serious complications. And it depends what you consider as serious. There have been some pretty bad complications that have arisen, but it's sad for me to say this. I don't know if the government's going to step in until something really bad happens.
Yeah, of course. It makes a lot of sense. I was having an interesting conversation with Hani at Derma Medical a few weeks ago about regulations. He had an interesting take on it. He doesn't think that the regulations will ever be for medics only to inject, because if that happens, his view is that's going to take all of the medics out of the NHS. That's already massively struggling. I mean, you used to work in the NHS full
Yeah.
time as a doctor. I know you still do occasionally because of your duty of care,
Yeah.
right? What's your take on that? Do you think if medics only are able to inject, do you think that's going to take more doctors out of the NHS, which is going to cripple the UK more?
Yeah, that's actually a really interesting take, and I don't disagree with that. I feel like if only doctors, dentists, nurses were able to do aesthetic treatments, I believe that there would be more people that go from the NHS and start working in aesthetics. I don't think it will be something that will collapse the NHS. I feel like a lot of people that work in the NHS, they know that they're not doing it for wild financial gains, right? They do it because they're very admirable. They're there to help people. They love their jobs. Most of the people that I speak to in NHS, the parts that they don't like of their jobs is mainly to do with the paperwork around it, the red tape, litigation, trying to, do a workload that not one person is meant to do. But the actual job itself, and I can speak from my own experience, I've spent, 2.5 years working in the NHS. A good portion of that I was working in A&E. And if you speak to my friends, they will say that Haroon used to love working in A&E. It's a very interesting job. You never get bored. You're helping people all the time. There's loads of variety, but it's the workload which is quite difficult and the lack of flexibility. So I was working 1 in 2 weekends. So I didn't really have that many weekends. And a lot of the time you have a weekend off, you're struggling from the previous 5 days that you were working, right? So I think it's the workload that people don't like. But the day-to-day job, I feel like most people enjoy. And a lot of doctors that go into the NHS, they almost know what they're signing up for.
Of course.
Yes, I think they should be paid more, which is why you see all of these strikes happening at the moment. And they should be. And I mean, my take on it is even if the government were to give them, I believe it's a 33% pay increase, I still don't think they're being paid enough. If you think about what a doctor actually does in that situation, right? If they were to get paid from £14 to £19 an hour for someone to save your life, £19 an hour, I think that's wild, right?
I mean, I think the extra £6 worth it,
Yeah.
for life
Yeah.
or death.
Yeah, absolutely.
People have a lot of like mixed views on the NHS.
Yeah.
You turn on the news, you see how the NHS is really struggling, which,
Yeah.
like, no doubt it is because of underfunding. But then I also feel like the NHS doesn't always get the credit it deserves. For example, my sister, when she was born, she had a hole in her heart, right? So she had to have like surgery, have a pacemaker put in, and the NHS for her have saved her life. Every 7 or 8 years, she gets the heart monitor, fixed. I don't think fixed is the right word. I think they replace it.
Okay.
And they've been fantastic
Yeah.
to her, right? But then I feel like because of the situation where it is massively underfunded, like, do you see, as someone who's worked in the NHS, do you think it's going to get better, or do you think it's going to gradually, continuously decline?
Yeah, I mean, I reflect what you say as well, right? I feel like the NHS is amazing. It's one of the best healthcare systems in the world. Now, there are, of course, better healthcare systems, but it's free. So
Yeah.
you can have the most weird, wonderful disease that, super rare, and you will get treated, and you'll get treated good. It might not be world class. There might be better providers. If you go over the pond to America, fair enough, there might be shorter wait times. I mean, almost certainly there will be shorter wait times, right? And the treatment that you get might be a little bit better, okay? But you're getting treated for free and pretty good. Now, with non-life threatening things, I feel like the wait time is quite extensive, but I feel like where the NHS does really well is when it comes to emergencies. Now, generally speaking, if you had an emergency, heart attack, stroke, car accident, you look at the way that doctors deal with that, it's excellent. It's excellent, life-saving treatments. I do agree when it comes to I don't want to call them mundane, but the non-life-threatening issues, I feel like there is room for improvement. The question is over the next couple of years, is it going to get better or worse? Hard for me to answer that. I don't see it getting much better, though. That's the unfortunate truth. The way that I look at the NHS is it's great for patients, but in order for it to be great for patients, it has to be terrible for the people that are working in there. So I feel like in the NHS, if you're working in there, you're not getting paid that well. You're being overworked. You're probably doing the job of 2 or 3 people. in order for you to provide a decent service to patients because it's free. Now, the big question comes is, what is the government going to do about this, right? Do you think the government can probably spare a little bit more money for the NHS? I mean, we know what the government spends their money on, right? You know, funding certain things. We won't go into too much detail about that, but they probably waste a lot of money, right? I remember seeing some stat during COVID where they spent over £2 billion on out of date PPE. So they ordered a bunch of PPE. It came. They spent 2 bill on it, and it was out of date. So they can spend 2 billion on out of date PPE, right? Not just simple check, right? Just is what's the sell by date for this PPE? So it wasn't used. It was just can't be used. If they can, for them to deliver that pay rise that the doctors are asking for, they have to spend roughly 1 billion extra a year, roughly. So if they spent wasted 2 billion on out of date PPE, could they spare another billion for doctors, for them to be happy with their jobs, for them to feel like they're not right next to broke working as a
Most
doctor?
definitely. I think the biggest problem is, though, like the people who are in charge of the NHS have never had an NHS appointment in their life. They've always had the private health sector. They've had the luxury of that. So I feel like sometimes they're just out of touch with day-to-day people, day-to-day lives, right? Going back to the training academy stuff, okay? So looking at the training academy space, the prices of these courses for aestheticians to learn the trade now has reduced massively. So, I speak to some of my clients 5-10 years ago. If you want to train in aesthetics, it costs, I couldn't tell you the exact amount, but some of my clients have said they spent over 10K, 15K just to get properly trained. Whereas now, a lot of academies, a lot of reputable academies, they've had to reduce their prices just to compete with the market average. So you can now get trained in aesthetics for as little as £1,250 for some courses, £1,500, £2,000. Where do you think this is going, right? Because a lot of my clients are literally saying they can't do it any cheaper. They want to get it back to where it was and what they paid to train. So do you feel that regulations are going to help kind of bring the high ticket back to the academy space where it's going to be more expensive again for people to train? Or do you think it's going to stay at this reduced amount?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting point. I mean, I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about the pricing strategy when it comes to training courses, but I mean, we can work through it. I'll tell you how much I've spent over the years, anywhere between 20 to 25 grand on all the courses that I've gone, either online courses or physical courses. It's interesting, right? Because again, slightly controversial, but is a one-day course going to make you a good aesthetic practitioner?
Oh, hell no.
Right, cool.
Hell
Not
no.
that controversial then, cool. I'm glad you mentioned that. So, yeah, a one-day training course is not going to make you into a world-class aesthetic trainer, right? I think people need to understand that it takes years of kind of focused effort. The training courses have to happen, but then you have to do your own work in your own spare time, right? So you have to spend a lot of money and time in order to be good in this industry. What I hope doesn't happen, it becomes like a conveyor belt where, okay, we just want to get as many people in. We just want them to pay the money. We'll teach them really rudimentary stuff, basic stuff, and then out the door, you're off on your bike, basically. I hope it doesn't become like that. If regulation were to come in, I mean, I would see the prices probably going up, actually. I don't know if that would mean more people would end up doing courses. I mean, the way that I think of it, I'll be completely frank. I feel like you have medical training organizations and then you have non-medical training organizations. And I feel like for some reason, the medical training organizations are trying to compete on price with non-medical training organizations. So if you go to a non-medical training organization, they're usually not charging that close to what a medical training organization would do. It might be because there's a discrepancy in quality that you're delivering. It might be because the clientele that you're targeting are deemed to be higher paid. The assumption is, a hairdresser doesn't get paid as much as a dentist, for example. Therefore, if we're doing a medical training course, we can charge a little bit higher. So, I mean, I think if regulation comes in, the prices are probably going to go up. I can't say that for sure, but I think so, right? But I think overall the quality shouldn't be hampered just because the price is going down. It doesn't, if you used to charge $3,000 for a training course, the most I've ever spent for a training course is $2,500, 1 day training course.
What was that course for?
Good question. It was called the Artistic Facial Transformation, and it was delivered by Zach Ali, who we both know, and he's an excellent, the big dog, right? He's an excellent injector, world class, and I felt like I got my money's worth during that course. It's essentially a course where it takes all the treatments that you have available to you, and artistically you assess someone's face and decide how you're gonna, improve the way that they look. It's essentially a patient coming in saying, "I've got an unlimited budget. Do whatever you think is going to make me look its best. I'm not fussed about how much it's going to cost." So that kind of really allows you to, one, be creative, and also they're the kind of clients that you do make a lot of money from, but also the patient satisfaction is easily the highest. If you can imagine, if someone comes in, there's some treatments that I feel like are single areas. They have high patient satisfaction, tear troughs, noses, these type of things. I've only had about 5 patients that cry on me after the treatment, and 4 of them were noses. 1 of them was a full face treatment. So I feel like noses people have like a connection to with their nose, right? If they don't,
big time.
With the full facial transformation, I feel like patient satisfaction is super high because sometimes the results compete with surgery. Without surgery, minimal downtime, they kind of walk out with a result on the day. 45-minute procedure. So.
Yeah. From what I've seen as well, the non-surgical rhinoplasty, the before and afters, I see it and I'm like, wow, this is crazy. The transformation it makes, it's just so noticeable, right? Would you say for you it's more the noses where you get the best kind of feedback from clients? That emotional type of feedback.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, noses, I feel like it's such a big game changer. It took me a while to get good at them, but I feel like once you get good at them, now I'm pretty confident that any nose that I see, I'm more than happy to at least, give a decent change to, even if they don't fill the perfect criteria of who makes a good candidate. I'm quite confident, and you can probably see on my Instagram page I do a ton of noses, so it's quite nice that people come to me and trust me with this kind of delicate area of their face, almost from a I guess it is, somewhat of an ego point of view. Not many people do noses well, so the fact that I'm able to do them well, almost tap myself on the shoulder, 100%, right? So maybe there is an element of an ego there, but also the response that you get from patients, most of them, say it's a life-changing treatment for them. You go back 10 years, you had to have a 3-hour operation for the nose. I still get clients to this day that have had a surgical rhinoplasty and they regret it, and they come to me in order for me to almost try and give them their old nose back. So I think patient satisfaction-wise, from a surgical versus non-surgical, it's significantly higher with non-surgical. Now, you can't treat everyone. If someone's got a really deviated septum, you can't get any functional benefit from adding filler to the nose. But from a cosmetic point of view, the gap between surgery and non-surgical results, I think is getting smaller and smaller. And I'd argue to say with noses, I think the results are better. Yeah.
You touched on something really interesting earlier about getting good at certain treatments. We'll come on to that in a second because I've got a couple of interesting questions to ask you, right? But let's talk about that in terms of how to actually get good within aesthetics. I've got some more stats here. I've came prepared with some stats.
I like it.
So out of every 100 students that train within aesthetics, statistically only 10 actually ever start a business, okay? Now, out of those 10 people, the stat is 50% of all startups fail within the first 5 years, as we know business is tough, okay? So that means for every 100 students that train, only 5 of them will ever make it past 5 years within the aesthetics industry. So what do you actually think it takes to be successful within the aesthetics industry? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, those stats are really interesting because I would probably reflect. I've been a trainer for coming up to 3 years, I'd say. And it's unfortunate, but, the stats don't lie, right? Every 100 people that you train, there's only a few of them that, even after a year, they're still asking me questions. I follow a lot of my students online as well, so I can see them progressing in their aesthetic careers or, unfortunately, sometimes not progressing, right? It's a big question, but I think there's a few factors that we can kind of dissolve it down. I think the hallmark of every good aesthetic practitioner is based on their training. So, and that can be broken down into loads of segments as well. So courses, I don't know anyone personally that's just done a foundation and advanced course and become really successful in this. I think everyone starts there. I started there. You do the basic courses, but then you have to almost progress and do the more advanced treatments as well. And not only do the more advanced treatments, but really nail them down. So, for example, tear troughs, I can say personally, it probably took me about 200 to 300 treatments before I started to think, oh, I'm actually good at this. Nose is probably a couple hundred as well until I started to think, oh, I'm really good at this. In a training course, how many do you do, right? 2, 3, 4, if it's a really busy training course. So what the training course teaches you is how to be safe and a general structure of how you should approach a treatment. However, a training course is not going to make you world class, whereas you leave the training course and then you apply what you've learned again and again and again. So there's a saying that I say to my students, I say, even if you're an idiot and you do 1,000 treatments, you're going to be better than a genius who does 10 treatments, right? So people, if you just get the numbers in, and dentists know this really well, right? They actually track how many procedures they've done. Surgeons as well. So the more procedures you do, just by the nature of, learning a little bit here, a little bit there, experience, you just get good at it. So I think in order to be good, you just have to do the training courses, which, is almost the entry fee, I guess, in order to do these treatments. And then you have to go away and you just have to figure out ways to practice. The one thing that helped me is, especially in my kind of early couple of years doing these treatments, because don't trust what you see in social media. The first year, you're not busy, right? I don't care who you are. In the first year, 2 years, you're not inundated with clients. I haven't seen someone who's been super busy in the first year.
It's good you say that,
Yeah.
right? Because most people won't ever talk about that or the vulnerabilities. So,
Mm.
building for the first 1 to 2 years, what does that look like?
It's hard, man. It's hard. I mean, I was quite fortunate. As soon as I came out of medical school, I did my first training course. And the same as most people doing aesthetics, you think, yeah, I'm going to nail it in the first year. I'm going to be super successful after 12 months of starting this company, right? And yeah, the truth is very different, right? In the first year, it's difficult. It feels like you're putting a lot of effort in and you're not getting anything back. That's what it feels like in the first year. In my first 6 months, I probably treated, outside of the training courses, maybe 10 people. So there was, I remember, a 2 month period where I was trying hard to get clients and it was just very quiet. And I took loads of different approaches. So I went to all the dental practices. I went to 30 different dental practices in, I'd say, a 10 or 15 mile radius. And I said, look, I'm a doctor. I've done these training courses. Can you give me some clients and we can do some sort of a profit share? One of those got back to me. And to this day, I would still go to that dental practice probably once every 3 months and just do a day there, right?
Amazing.
I'd go to salons in the local area and I'd say, look, if you give me clients, I will bring all the products. I will do the treatments at your vicinity and you take a profit share from that. They don't have to do much. They just have to find me the clients essentially. So you have to do loads of, I guess, difficult things. It's not easy walking into a bunch of salons saying, yeah, look, I'm a doctor, I do these treatments, do you want to spark up a deal, right? But I think in the early stages, you just have to do a lot more and not expect much in return. And we were having this conversation earlier on. There's definitely a tipping point where in the first year, 2 years, sometimes 3 years, you feel like you're chasing after clients. Like, I want to get this practice. Let me do these treatments on people, right? Whether it be family members, whether it be friends within your social circle, people in the local area. But then there's definitely a tipping point where people will start finding you. People will start searching for you. And the honest truth is clients are looking for high level aesthetic practitioners. There is a demand for good aesthetic work. So if you position yourself correctly, then people will come and find you. So yeah, I think the first 1, 2, 3 years is essential, but it's difficult. Don't expect to make. I mean, I said to myself, I'm making, after a couple of months, I realized, yeah, I'm not going to become this world-class aesthetic practitioner after a year. So I kind of said to myself, look, I'm not even focused on the money side of things. I just want to get really good at aesthetics. So then my focus shifted a little bit, and it shifted towards just being excellent at the treatments. So yeah, that was definitely the first couple of years. Other things that make people good, and this definitely helped with me, is gaining as much learning from each one of your experiences. So it might sound a little bit nerdy me saying this, but before every training course, I would go over all the course material and I would basically answer my own questions before I even went to the training course. So there would be certain questions that I had. What is Botox? Can you treat this area with Botox? What is dermal filler? Can you do this? What are the risks, etc. So I'd know the training manual before I'd even go. Bearing in mind, I was a broke F1 and I was spending a lot of my money for these training courses. So I was going to learn the maximum amount. I wasn't going to go there and just sit there, not ask any questions and leave. Right?
100% got to get your value for
That's
money.
it. That's it. So I probably annoyed some of the trainers that trained me because I was just chewing their ears off, right? But that's what I would do, and then I would leave there, and every nugget of information that I got, I remember Zach Ali once told me off because I was just there with my notepad and pen and writing. Because I stopped writing, pay attention, right? I'm like, I'm gonna forget if I don't write this down, right? So I would go home, and then I'd have documents that I would just write of things that they said that aren't in the courses because they drop gems and nuggets that I know I'm gonna forget in a week's time, right? So then I'd go home, I'd write all of the documents. I still got these documents to this day. I'd say, yeah, dozens of pages. So that was me gaining the maximum amount from each training experience. And then when I would see clients, I would reflect on each client, physically reflect. I would go away because I would only have a client a month, right? So I need to gain some learning out of it.
100%.
So then I would go back and be like, oh, my consultation could have been better because of X, Y, Z. Oh, I shouldn't explain risks like this. I should explain risks like that. Oh, these injections, I maybe could have done better because of X, Y, and Z. So I'm trying to learn as much as I possibly can from each one of those experiences. And then you notice you get better quicker. And I was doing that probably for the first, I'd say 2 to 3 years easily. And then it got to a point where it's like, this isn't efficient anymore. I'm quite busy now, so I can't just go away and write a document every time.
It's interesting to hear your take on that because that's really good advice. So hopefully whoever listens to this who is in the training process, they can take that on board because I find it fascinating because although we're in different fields, it's like when I first got into marketing, when I invested in a trainer, right, I'd absorb everything in their office. I'd write stuff down that they didn't even tell me to write down. And sometimes people looked at me funny, like, bro, what you even doing? I'm just thinking, I've paid a lot of money. And when I first started, I was skint as well, right? I was like, I'm going to get as much value as possible. And success leaves tracks as well. If you can learn from the top 1% of your industry, it's like you don't always have to reinvent the wheel. You can just pick up little pieces from everybody who does things well and amalgamate and merge them into your own style, no matter what industry you're in. Just staying on this slightly, right? So the industry's saturated in aesthetics, okay? There's more practitioners today than there's ever been before. The industry is growing in revenue. It's worth billions and billions of pounds to the UK economy annually. How do you actually stand out to be a top 1% injector? Because people say a lot of the time, the market's saturated. I don't know how I'm going to get clients. How do you be a top 1% practitioner in 2024?
Yeah, great question. The whole saturation narrative, it's an interesting one, right? I do agree with you. There are more practitioners now than there ever has been. I don't know if that's, I would agree, I would assume that it's worldwide, but certainly in the UK, there's more people doing aesthetics than there ever has been. However, if you look at the way that the actual industry is growing, there's more people doing aesthetic treatments than there ever has been. I think it's growing, 12 to 13% year on year. Don't quote me on the exacts, but it's growing year on year, right? And you're right, it's worth billions of dollars at this point, and it's not slowing up. The treatments are getting better. People are more confident to go and get these treatments, right? Across the age board, by the way, you might have someone who's in their 60s getting their first aesthetic treatment. You might have someone in their 20s getting their first aesthetic treatment. So I think people are getting more and more confident to have these treatments, and I think social media is a big driver of that. People see these things online. It looks straightforward. It looks simple. These are the results that I like. It looks like a safe treatment. So I think the industry is growing, not just the practitioners, but also the people that are seeking these treatments as well. And the analogy that I gave earlier on today is the way that you separate yourself is by becoming the best in your area. It's as simple as that, right? And if there's, 10 barbers on your street, it seems saturated from the outside, but the person who's the best on that street, the best barber, it's not saturated for them because they're the best. Everyone goes to the best, right?
True.
So if you position yourself to be a really high level aesthetic practitioner, you're really good at what you do, you produce excellent results, people will naturally gravitate towards you. So my kind of advice for people that are trying to get into aesthetics and trying to separate themselves, results talk, right? We're in a very visual industry where you can just put out your before and afters and you can let everyone else judge them. So if you are putting out good before and afters, if your work is genuinely good, then people will naturally gravitate towards you. So that's the way that I get over the saturated thing. So we talked about Zach Ali a few times today. It's never been saturated for Zach Ali, right? Everyone, he has people flying in from all over the world
For
to
the
see him.
viewers, right?
Yeah.
Who might not know,
Yeah.
obviously he's a top G.
Yeah.
But who is Zach Ali?
Yeah. So Zach Ali, fine. I'll tell you my first experience of Zach Ali, right? He actually, I mean, I owe him a lot because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be doing aesthetics right now, maybe. So I was in my third year of medical school and I started to have doubts about working in the NHS. For those of you that don't know how the medical school kind of process works, in the third year, you start spending more and more time on the ward. So you start interacting with doctors, consultants, people that, in 20 years' time, you're going to be in their position. And I'll be completely honest, I didn't really love what I saw. Even the people that were excellent at their jobs, they didn't have the life that I could kind of think, oh, yeah, what a great life. They're overworked. They're helping tons of people, which is fantastic. But they're overworked, they're underpaid, they don't spend that much time with their family, they're always at work, they're always staying late. You have people in their 50s that have a couple of kids, young kids, and they're staying until 7 o'clock when they finish at 5 o'clock. So I just thought, you know what, this isn't something that I love. So I actually took some time out of medical school, which is where we actually met. So I
12 years ago?
Yeah, is it
About
that long
12 years
ago?
ago, man.
Oh,
Yeah,
stop
long
it.
time.
Stop it. That makes me feel old. During that time, I went to a talk called Medicine Stay or Leave because I was in this weird place where I was like, I don't know if I'm going to go back to medicine. I only had 2 years left of studying. But there was this talk that was essentially a bunch of doctors that had finished their degrees and instead of staying in the NHS, they started doing other things, whether that be going into property development, whether that be going into kind of medical technology like IT solutions, these type of things. And there was a bunch of different people speaking on that. And one of the speakers on that was Zach Ali. And he came out and he just blew me away. For 45 minutes he talked, and I promise you, at the end of that talk, I didn't have a clue what he was talking about, but I just thought, you know what, I want to do what he's doing. Very charismatic guy. He talked about aesthetics, he talked about dermal fillers, he talked about Botox. And I'll be honest, I didn't really know what any of that was. I've never heard of dermal fillers. I somewhat knew about Botox, but not really in a lot of detail. But at the end of it, I was like, okay, this guy seems really successful. He's kind of gone the same route that I have been in the past, where he's gone through the medical schooling system and instead of working in the NHS, he's decided to do this. And he seems really passionate. Seems like he's quite successful as well. So yeah, after that, we kind of spoke in a lot of detail, even after the training course. And I said, you know what, this is something that I'm going to do when I finish. So then that was one of the main reasons that I went back into aesthetics, went back into medical school, finished off my medical school degree. And the plan was as soon as I finish, I just start doing this. And the first training course that I went to, it was his company. Now, Zach is, I guess, a world-class aesthetic injector. He's been doing it for ages. I want to say like 12 to 15 years. Excellent injector, knows his stuff inside out, but he's also built a fantastic training company as well, which he's now sold, and he's kind of taken a bit of a back step. But I owe a lot to him. He kind of taught me not only that aesthetics is a real career route for people. It's not just something you can do on the side. It's something that you can build a business from, and you can kind of not only become financially successful, but also a lot less stress. There's definitely stress, right? Everything has stress, but a lot less stress than a busy A&E department, for example. And also there is a skill element. I'll be completely honest. When I first started, I thought, you're just putting filler in people's faces. You're just injecting a face, right? There's no artistry behind it. But he really made me realize, oh, there is a skill behind it. And the better you become at that skill, in turn, that will mean that you will become successful and you will kind of build a career around this.
So he was like your Mr. Miyagi for aesthetics.
Yeah, I'm very blessed, actually. I've had loads of Mr. Miyagis, to be fair. Nice. I've had loads of people, to be fair, that have kind of, added little bits and pieces, but he was probably the first person that got me into aesthetics, certainly. And also, yeah, I've been to a lot of training courses that he's delivered. I'd say, yeah, there's been a handful of people that have kind of really shaped my career. He's one of them. Amrit Tiara, who you know quite well as well. He is the CEO of Derma Medical at the
Great
moment.
guy.
Great guy,
Really,
right?
really cool guy.
So he's another person, not only from a technical point of view, has helped me out a lot. He was kind of the one that really helped me understand how to treat the under eye area. Also noses as well. He's kind of really helped me just add a layer on top of aesthetics, right? Just becoming better and better. Just going among the differences of non-medics and medics. Medics see all of these treatments as medical treatments, and just the general premise of medical treatment is someone suitable for this treatment? Will they benefit? Why am I doing this treatment? Whereas with a non-medic, it might be more business related. Oh, I'm doing this many meals, therefore I'm going to make this much money, whether they're suitable or not. Now, I'm generalizing a little bit, right? But I think the backing of a medical professional, they generally speaking shouldn't or wouldn't do treatments that patients might not be suitable for. Whereas with non-medics, you might have anyone that comes in through the door wanting a BBL, and the thought process might be, oh, I'm making $1,000 from this hour and a half procedure, potentially. So I think that might be one of the reasons. There's a handful of people in the UK that are doctors that are doing BBLs, and I think they're doing it at a very high level. So I'll shout out one person. I don't know him personally, but his name's Dr. Dooku. One of my friends works closely with him. And he is a doctor. He's got loads of experience in BBLs. He does loads of BBLs, and his results look great. They don't look overfilled, unnatural. He's got loads of reviews. So I think with most things, if it's done correctly, it can be done in a safe manner. But unfortunately, because the UK is unregulated, I feel like the complications that you get from injecting 1 mil versus injecting hundreds of mils is usually more severe.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Yeah, that's my
I
guess.
mean, like some of the complications have been life-threatening. Like from what I've read, some of them have been bad.
Yeah.
You know, you don't really see that as much with. It's like you said, dermal filler or facial rejuvenation packages. I want to get your take on something, Kay. A lot of my clients have been talking to me about certain things within the industry recently, and I feel that there's quite a lot of misinformation within the aesthetics industry when it comes to the training academy side of things. You know, not all training academies, a very small percentage, but they promote the good life, right? Like, for example, there's certain adverts that you'll have people chucking money out of helicopters, driving the Lamborghini, spraying champagne, having money showers, you know, and that's spreading the narrative where if you train in aesthetics, this is going to be your life. I work with like 45 clinic owners. Some of them have nice cars, right? But, you know, like you, they've been in the industry 6 years, 10 years, 15, 20 years. And it's not really, in my opinion, what it seems. But I want to get your take on it. Because, of course, it's a great industry. You can make a lot of money.
Yeah.
But what's your take on this?
Yeah, I mean, I find that hilarious that people are doing advertisements for medical treatment saying that if you train with us, you can drive a Lamborghini, you can fly an helicopter. I think it's wild. So yeah, I mean, as you mentioned, in this industry, you can make good money, right? But it takes a long time. It takes years to even make a living. For me, my first goal was make the same amount of money that I do from my NHS career. Once I've done that, okay, I want to double the amount of that I make from the NHS career. And at that point where I've doubled it, then I'm going to leave the NHS. So for me, it probably, I mean, I can talk figures. I'm quite happy to talk figures if you're happy for me to
let's
talk figures.
man.
So in the first year, I wouldn't even say I made any money. I mean, in the first year, I almost certainly made a loss because I spent a lot of money on courses. So even when I did a handful of treatments, made a couple £100 here and there, I would pump all of that money back into training. In my first year, basically didn't make any money. In my second year, I was very lucky that through a social contact, I ended up working at a clinic in Birmingham. The clinic's called Secret Aesthetics. I still work there to this day. And that allowed me to not only make more money, but get more practice as well. So it was a game changer for me because when I started working for this clinic, they were giving me 10 patients in a day. So I was getting, for me, it was more the practice. I was like, okay, instead of me doing 1 patient a month, I'm now seeing 10 patients in a clinic day, and I might do 4 clinics in a month.
You were getting like nearly for a whole year.
Exactly.
In one day.
Yeah. So for me, that personally was a game changer. And I encourage a lot of newbie practitioners to try and affiliate themselves with an established clinic because not only are you making significantly more money, you're also getting getting significantly more practice. And sometimes the person can have a mentor role as well, where he kind of helps you up your game as well. So for me, that was like a game changer. And I started to realize doing 2 to 3 days at Secret Aesthetics, I was making the same money in a month in the NHS. So for me, that was a game changer. But to get to that point, it took 2 years. I was in the hole when it comes to money. At this point, I probably spent, I'd say 7 or 8 grand on training courses, maybe even more than that in the first year and a half. And then after that, I started working for Derma Medical, so as a training organization, which they pay well. I'm not going to lie, it's good. I do it more than just for money because I think training, you almost want to give back to the people. And I feel it makes your game better as well. When you're training, it almost makes you better.
Well, I feel like it makes you have to stay sharp.
100%, 100%. You have to stay on top of your game. And another thing is, a bit of a side point, it makes you question everything you do. Why is my hand here? Why am I stretching here? Why am I going in at this angle, not this angle? And you almost have to justify everything. So it really kind of makes you take a step back and assess your own treatments, because trainees will ask you these questions. Why are you going in like that? Why not this? I saw this on YouTube. Why aren't you doing this? So I have to be able to justify why I'm doing everything and put a rationale behind it. So, I always give the analogy of driving, right? When we first did our driving test, we would be on job. We would have both our hands on the steering wheel, would look, in all the right places. And then eventually you kind of, I don't want to say slack, but eventually you find your habits.
One hand
right?
on the wheel,
yeah.
seat back.
Talk for yourself, Sam. No, I'm joking. I'm joking. So for me, I was quite lucky that I was a trainer quite early on in my career. So it made me not develop any bad habits. Whereas if you see someone who's been doing it for 10 years, but they haven't had the opportunity to train, they might have these bad habits that they've just developed over the years and not realized it. But I was quite lucky. Early on in my career, I was able to rationalize everything that I was doing. And being in a training environment, you're around a lot of other high-end injectors as well. So it almost indirectly makes you bump up your game as well, because there's all these other great injectors that have got significantly more experience than me. Why are they doing it like that? And I'm an inquisitive person. I'll ask a bunch of questions. So I think that was really helpful, and financially it works out quite well. So where were we? So yeah, second year. That for me, that was like my transition year. It's called an F3 for those doctors that are watching, where a lot of people take time out of their NHS career and do a lot of locuming, which means that they make a lot of money, a lot more money than what they would kind of in a standard day job. And then they might consider going into training. For me, that was a year where I was going to try and make aesthetics my career, essentially. So that year I was doing a lot more aesthetics, a lot more marketing. I was doing a lot of videos, content creation, just to try to get my name out there. That year, I was doing a decent amount of locum shifts as well. And every time I would do a locum shift, it would be tough. I'd do 12 hours in A&E, and it would be quite hectic. And then I'd see 2 patients in clinic, super nice conversations, really relaxing, and I'd end up making significantly more with those 2 patients than I would with 12 hours in the A&E shift. So there came a point where I was like, okay, I don't really enjoy it. I don't love it the same way I used to. It's very stressful. It's very hard for me to do both. I remember hearing the saying, you can't chase 2 rats, right? You have to chase 1 rat. So for me, aesthetics was that rat. So I started doing a lot more training. I started doing a lot more clinics. I started working in a clinic in Brighton. I started doing more in London. And then the better you get, I feel like the more money you end up making. As simple as that, right?
Yeah,
the better you
100%.
are in aesthetics, the more money you end up making. So, to throw some figures out there, after about 2.5 years, 3 years of being in aesthetics, I was making 5 figures, which is quite, if you come from, a medical.
5 figures a month?
5 figures a month, yeah.
Oh,
so,
okay.
yeah, over 10 grand a month, which in the NHS, if you were to give 20 years to the NHS, or let's say 15 years to the NHS, and you become a consultant, you might not even make that. Most consultants, they're on anywhere between 80 grand to about 120 grand on the top end. Now, they can supplement their income through other ways, but generally speaking, they're given 40 hours a week to make around 100 grand. And 100 grand after tax is about 5 grand, 6 grand, I think, a month, something like that.
Oh, I don't. When it comes to PAYE, it's been wild.
Me too. Yeah. I'm making a big assumption, but yeah.
I know that the tax is 45%, 40 or
Wild.
45%
Yeah.
after 45k. Everything's, I think it's 45%.
That's crazy.
So I mean, if you do the maths, 100k a year salary, you don't pay 40% on the whole thing. It's what you earn after the 40.
Yeah.
Prior to that, it's 20%.
Yeah.
So you're not left with much.
No,
You're
this
not
is
left with much
yeah.
at all.
This is the thing, right? And again, the benefits of having a limited company, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, for me, that was like, oh, okay. So after 3 years of giving a lot of time and effort, and people watching, I don't want them to think, oh yeah, 3 years, just do a little bit here and there, and then I can make 5 figures a month, right? For me, it was
Dedicating your life.
dedicating everything, right? Every spare moment I had, I was just doing aesthetics. I was either watching videos online of other aesthetic practitioners. I paid for a bunch of courses. I was constantly learning about anatomy. And we're quite fortunate in this day and age of the internet where you can just go and research stuff. Now, you have to be a bit sensible. You can't just watch anyone. But yeah, I was either watching a video online. I was reflecting from the treatments that I did. I bought anatomy books. I bought specific aesthetic books as well that I'd read about. I'd learn about beauty, structures, proportions of people's faces. So I kind of did everything I possibly could to be good quickly. And I was quite lucky during those times as well, where only after 2 years of doing aesthetics, I worked as a trainer. Only after a year of doing aesthetics, I got picked up by an established clinic. So there was elements of luck, right? But
I believe that I heard this from someone. I don't know who said this, but it really hit home for me. Luck is when preparation meets opportunity.
Yeah.
So you met someone, they put you on, but do you think if you weren't knocking on 20, 30 dentist doors a day, making those cold calls, asking for collaborations, studying harder than anyone else, do you think you would have got those opportunities? I guess we'll never know.
Yeah,
but, you know, when you think about it, that might be, probably, in my opinion, it's definitely why you are where you are today.
Yeah.
You put in more work than the majority, so you should be proud of yourself, man.
Yeah,
really
thank you, man. Appreciate that. But yeah, there's always an element of luck. But you're absolutely right. I think let's say if I got the call to become a trainer and my anatomy knowledge was rubbish, right, or my results were rubbish, and I didn't know my stuff, then I wouldn't be a trainer for very long, right? There's a decent amount of turnover as well. So I feel like absolutely. But for me, the big change was, okay, I'm making 5 figures a month. This is really good.
How did that change your life?
From
earning 0 to 5 figures a month. Like, how did that change your life?
So, I mean, no Rolexes, no Lamborghinis, no Ferraris, nothing like that, right? Yeah, nothing like that, right? I wasn't throwing money around. It just gives you an element of security and freedom. I think that's for me what it was, right? For me, I want to kind of take my family on holiday when they want to go on holiday. I want to take a couple of weeks off when I want to take a couple of weeks off. I never want to have that inkling in my head where, oh, are we going to be able to pay for X, Y, and Z? So that was the main thing for me. And
how did that feel from never having that to finally having that?
Yeah.
Like what kind of emotion?
Huge, man. Yeah. I mean, it was, it's interesting, right? I feel like me and you are both quite similar in the sense where once you hit a goal, it's like, all right, what's the next goal?
Yeah, what's next?
Yeah, what's next, right? Where sometimes you're right, you should kind of sit down and say, oh, okay, I've done all right. I've hit my goal. I should almost enjoy it to some extent. I recently went to holiday after ages. I mean, I was just working nonstop. And then my wife, my mum, and me went to Antalya. Only for 5 days. It wasn't a long trip. But those 5 days, it was like, okay, cool. Like we're living okay, right? We're doing okay. We can kind of do the nicer things in life. I don't think we're on the level of, every time I go on holiday, I'll rent out a Lamborghini. So I'm not there yet, right? But I think it's nice that, okay, cool, we can go to most restaurants that we want to. We can eat whatever we want to. We can do activities where we're not too fussed about the financial implications. Now, we're all, in my family, we're all quite sensible. We're not crazy people where we just want to buy, gold, Rolexes, watches, all of this, right? So we're all quite sensible, but it's nice just having that security. For me, it was always that. It was always security. It was never, I want to be the richest person in the room. It's like, nah, if I can look after my family, if I can look after, my future kids, everyone's okay. No one's really worrying about money. That's cool.
That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
I feel like materialism is so pointless in a way because there's always something better to buy.
Yeah.
There's been times where I've bought nice things for myself and it's really nice, right?
Yeah.
For a couple of minutes, maybe a couple of days, and then you just forget about it.
So true.
I read something and it said, whatever you can buy from the mall will not mean anything in 10 years. It won't mean anything to you. Nothing at all.
Yeah.
And that really hit home for me. You know?
An interesting thing for me, right? And again, I feel like you have these experiences, and again, it might be lucky or it might just be putting yourself in that situation. But my cousin, if he's watching this, how you doing, Ardil? You okay? He's very close to me, and he's very successful in the financial industry. He's a little bit older than me, but he a couple of years ago bought a McLaren, beautiful car. I think it was a 720S, really nice McLaren. And growing up, when I was younger, I was always like, oh, I really want a supercar. It's like the top goal, right? I want to drive around in a supercar. And it was a beautiful car. And I would sit in it, he would drive me around. And then he went on holiday one day and he said, look, I need to park my car in your house. He was flying from Gatwick and he was like, look, you can drive the car. If anything happens to it, you're paying for it. I was like, okay, I'm probably not going to drive it because if anything happens to it, I can't afford, a couple of £1,000. This is when I just graduated from med school. And for about 2 days, I was like, I'm not touching it. Yeah. And then on the third day, I was like, you know what? There's a McLaren parked on my drive. I might as well, right? I was like, I drive cars. What's so different about this car? It's just a car, right? And then for about another 5 days, I was just driving this McLaren to the gym, to the shops. It was my car for 5 days.
Felt like the guy.
Honestly, for the first, I'd say, couple of days, it was like, yeah, I'm the man, young guy in this, beautiful car. But it gets to the point where it's like, is this it? I swear to God, after about a week, I was like, I'm so glad that I had that experience because now I know this is not the be all and end all. This is not some this huge goal that once I achieve, I'm going to be so happy and fulfilled. So it was a really nice experience for me to basically drive this car and pretend like it was mine. People take photos. People say, what do you do? And I have to lie because it's not my car. But yeah, after that experience, I was like, this is nice. And I hope in the future I get to experience this again with my own as my own car, but it's not
life. It's
not
nice,
life,
but
yeah.
it's not life. Like, you're quite similar to me. I had to learn the hard way. The industry I used to be in. I had a Rolex financed, Mercedes financed, and I'd done that because that's what I thought I had to do, because that's what people were telling me to do in that industry, including my managers. But I actually realized that it doesn't bring happiness. It can help, like having money is good, but I think it's a tool, right? So I'm similar to you. What I love is looking after my mum, my girlfriend, making sure that, if I stop earning money today, I'm all right. I'm all right, not forever, but for a while, I'm going to be okay. And I can look after my people.
Absolutely.
Right? That's like the most alpha feeling of all, is being able to look after your family.
100%.
For example, my mum, she's always struggled for money. She's never gone without, but she makes enough to survive. When it comes to holidays, she finds it hard. And all of her friends are going to Ibiza in July. She goes Ibiza.
Legend.
And she was like, it was tight for her to pay for it. And I saw she was just breaking her back trying to work extra shifts in her job.
Yeah.
And I just asked her, how much is it? She show me how much it was. And I was like, wait here. I went upstairs, got the cash out.
Yeah.
There's your Ibiza money.
Yeah, that's nice.
I want you to have it. And my mum's a very tough woman. The only time I ever see her emotional is when I give back to her, because she still thinks, you're my little boy, I should be looking after you. I said, you did for 18 years. I'm nearly 30 now. It's my time to look after you. And that feeling, oh my God. It's
beautiful, isn't it?
It's beautiful. Yeah. It really is. And I don't know if there's a slight selfish kind of meaning there, because it makes me feel good.
Yeah.
But she's happy doing it.
Yeah.
It's just the best feeling in the world.
Absolutely, man. And I think nothing beats that. And you were just going back to what did it mean making that money. And I think it was like, my mum's in Pakistan right now. My grandma was here for about 5 months. And she was just spending time with her grandma. Things like that, I feel like is priceless. So my grandma's been to the UK probably 2 times in her entire life. Absolutely hates it. Doesn't like the UK. She lives in Pakistan. And I kind of said I somehow convinced her to say, look, come over to the UK and just spend a little bit of time with my mum. And my mum has never spent since she's been married, she's never spent like a prolonged period of time with her mum, just because she's been raising us, and every time she would go and see her, it'd only be like a couple of weeks holiday. So and my mum loves looking after her own mum as well. I feel like both our mums are quite caring people, right? So I said to my mum, I was like, let her come to the UK and she can just live with us for however long she's able to bear the UK, right? Until she wants to run back to Pakistan. And surprisingly, she ended up staying for like, nearly 6 months. And during that period, it was almost like, okay, I'm quite busy, so I'm still going to spend time with her because she's living in my own house. But Mum, you take her wherever she wants to go. If she wants to go get that food, get her that food. If she wants to go to the beach, you can take her to the beach. And that feeling is just super nice. And my mum's super grateful for it. And you're right. There's, I would rather spend 10 grand on that than something that I'm going to wear on my wrist. So
100%, 100%.
yeah,
And if you live in London, I wouldn't even advise that you buy a 10 grand
Yeah.
watch and put it on your wrist, because people are getting stuck up for their watches
Yeah,
every day.
crazy.
I had a client come into the office Tuesday last week, right?
Yeah.
Had an AP on his wrist, okay?
Okay.
And that's like a 25K watch. And I was like, that's...
You're asking for it.
Yeah, I was like, that's a really nice watch. But I was just out of curiosity, do you wear that? Like, do you wear that around London? And he said, no, we can't. Like, he'll refuse to wear it. I mean, it's okay coming to my office, which is in Surrey, God, is get in the car, get out, tucking it over your sleeve.
Yeah.
But then it made me think, even with my watches, and I don't have any APs, I've got a couple of nice timepieces, classic timepieces. I don't really wear them anymore. I don't feel comfortable wearing them.
It's crazy, isn't it?
First time I felt comfortable wearing it was when I was in Dubai a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
You're fine out there.
Yeah.
You can wear whatever you want out there. So that's another thing with the watches. I think, like, if you're earning some good money, just think about what you're going to invest it in.
Yeah. I mean, don't get it twisted. I love a good watch, man. I love a good car. So these things I really enjoy, but you're right. It's limited happiness, right?
Yes.
They look good. You feel good for about a week, and then it's the same as any other watch, right?
You just want another one.
Just want another one, right? It's that, what's the word, hedonism, where it's like gratification, please myself with these things. And I think everyone should have a nice watch. I feel like everyone should have a nice car, right? That they enjoy driving. But I think there's other more important things. The thing that really winds me up is when I see, fairly youngish people that have made a decent amount of money, and instead of treating their family members that were there for them, they decide to buy a chain, a watch, a car. For what? And most of the time it's financed anyway, right?
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, for what? Your mum's never been to a high-end restaurant, and you're in this high-end restaurant with 3 of your mates with a rollie on your wrist that is probably not even yours, or you financed it. And that kind of winds me up a little bit. And it's like, your mum's, your dad's a taxi driver, or your dad's been working hard for his entire life to raise you. For me, that was like the first thing that I wanted to do. Once I made a bit of money, I was like, okay, cool. I'm going to take my mum to nice places where she's never been to, where she doesn't even ask for it, but I just want to do it just for the sake of it. So for me, it was like, I almost felt guilty when I went out with my mates to a nice restaurant, because I was like, oh, okay, sweet. I now need to take my mum to this restaurant as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
It's good that you have those morals, though. And I feel like when you're younger, you are naturally more selfish. I mean, just talking from my experience, maybe you're different. I was quite selfish as a teenager and in my early 20s. I think when I got to sort of 24, 25, so 5 years ago now, I started to really kind of hone in on what's important. Family, friends, relationships, connections, holidays, experiences. That's the stuff that stays with you forever.
Yeah.
Treating your loved ones. So just talking about that, like, what is your end goal here? Because you're working hard, you're doing well, you've got the 5 figures a month, you're training industry leaders at a hugely credible academy, Derma Medical. Your business is going really well as well, Mindful Aesthetics. What's the end goal for you? What are you working towards?
Yeah, it's interesting, right? And again, you're like me, where you have a goal, you hit it, you're like, okay, what's next, right? It's really interesting. So I'm in this position where I need to take it to the next level now, where I work in quite a lot of clinics. I do a bunch of treatments, on a weekly basis. The training, I don't think I'll ever give that up. I love the training aspect. I think it keeps me sharp. And in order to be an industry expert, you have to keep that training skill as well, that teaching skill. So for me, it's almost, I sometimes scratch my head and think, why are they even paying me to do this? I'm just standing up and talking to people, right? So that aspect, I don't think I'll ever drop. In the next 20 years, I think I'll continue training. In regards to the actual treatments itself, I still really enjoy doing the treatments. I feel like I've spoken to a few people that have been in the industry for a long time, and they almost say that I can't do that many treatments anymore. They just don't have the mental capacity, or they don't have the patience for it. So they end up dwindling it down to 1 day a week, 2 days a week. And I just enjoy doing the treatments. I mean, I always compare it to A&E, and it's like, would I rather spend 12 hours in A&E, or would I rather spend 12 hours speaking to lovely clients and treating them and seeing them happy and making good money in the meantime as well, right? So I can't see myself stopping or slowing down, to be honest. I think the next step really is to transition into opening up my own clinic and then trying to expand. That's basically what it is. Now, that might be a 2-year plan, that might be a 5-year plan, but I think that's the natural progression, right? Because at this element where I'm doing a lot of work in other clinics, which is great, but I think I have to factor I almost have to take the leap and be like, okay, I want to open up my own clinic, and then I need to start teaching and recruiting other doctors, dentists, nurses, and kind of, building like a little mini empire of aesthetics, right?
nice,
So I think that's the goal. It might take 5 years. The interesting question is do I do it in this country or do I do it somewhere else? Because the Middle East seems quite appealing at this stage. So
Huge opportunity.
huge, isn't it? Yeah.
It really is. It's very saturated though. I was quite surprised. Like, when I went to Dubai a few weeks ago, it felt like every other shop was a clinic or a medi spa. But it's like you said earlier, saturation's only a problem if you're doing the same thing as everyone else. you know?
So I think the plan would be to really establish myself here. And then when you do go over to the Middle East, you've already built up a little bit of a name for yourself.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're starting from scratch again. Again, we've talked about Zach a lot, but when Zach went over to the Middle East, it wasn't saturated for him. He had already built up quite a big name for himself in the UK.
So his reputation from the UK
Yeah,
held weight in Dubai. as well.
absolutely. Yeah. He was inundated when he went to the Middle
Crazy.
East.
How did
yeah.
they find out about him? Just from his high net worth clients? that live in
Good
Dubai,
question.
or-
So he actually had a lot of people that would fly out. So from the Middle East, they would come and they would have treatments with him, and then they would go back. I'm quite lucky because I've inherited some of his clients, and
Nice.
they're high net worth individuals that come get the treatments. They don't live in the UK. They might have a holiday there, and then they get the treatment there at the same time. But he used to have a lot of people that used to fly out, and I think because so many people are coming to see him from the Middle East, he thought, let me just do a clinic a month in the Middle East. So so that's the kind of, he's almost got the playbook, right? Build a really big name for yourself in the UK, and then when you go over to other countries, doesn't matter where you are, there'll be somewhat of a demand already built up for you.
Yeah. Makes a lot of sense.
But yeah, I don't know, man. It's strange, right? Because Middle East has all the benefits. You tax benefits, safety benefits, the education, weather. The education's good. Everyone's nice. Everyone's friendly. Food's great out there. But I don't know. It just
Food's
feels
so
like
good out
yeah, food's good.
It really
Food is
That's
good.
one thing that impressed me about Dubai. The food everywhere was fantastic.
Yeah, everywhere you went, it was great, right? It's at a high level. You can never go wrong with food places there. I haven't anyway. But one thing that I found was even pricing wise, it's not that expensive. You know, you go to a meal in central London, it's probably more expensive than if you go to a decent restaurant or even a high end restaurant in Dubai. So it's not.
Yes.
Yeah. Did
I
you
said
find
the,
that?
I said the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah.
I found that if you go to like a Novikov or Nobu in
Yeah.
London and compare that to like an Asia in Dubai,
Yeah.
it's not that crazy different.
No.
Alcohol's more expensive out there to
Okay.
be kind of expected.
Okay.
But then I've got friends that live in Dubai and they say petrol's cheaper,
Yeah,
groceries are cheaper, rent compared to London in the most part in Dubai is cheaper.
Mad cheaper. And the
Yeah.
properties are
Nicer.
a lot nicer, right? So it's interesting, but I mean, it's strange, right? But UK just feels like home. I don't know what it is. Born and raised it. I mean, I remember 5 years ago we moved house, right? And I don't know how familiar you are with kind of Surrey geography, but I lived in a place called Merstham, right?
I know Merstham.
You know Merstham,
yeah.
right? Not the nicest of areas. But there are areas, it's like a very farmy area, but then there's also areas where a little bit rough, not
Yes.
great, little bit run down, kind of.
Couple of dodgy roads opposite the petrol station.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. There's a few dodgy areas, and it's funny because we had 5 years ago we moved house to the place that I'm at the moment, and it's the first time we've ever moved as a family, and we moved from Merstham to Redhill, which is about a half an hour walk, a 10-minute drive, right? And it was crazy. I kind of said to mom, like, why didn't we move like somewhere far away? And I think we were both just quite comfortable in this location, even though it's not the best location.
It's home, isn't it?
It's home. It's tough, man. I was kind of born and raised in and around Red Hill, and it's like I know the shops, I know the people. My friends are here. My mum's friends are there as well. So you know, for us to go and move up north for something, that wasn't even a conversation point.
And I feel like Red Hill, although okay, you compare it to Reigate, there's differences,
Yeah.
but it's safe.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's
Yeah.
quite nice. There's definitely worse places.
Yeah,
Similar to me, I grew up in South Croydon.
yeah,
23 years of my life,
Yeah.
majority of my life, I've lived in South Croydon, and it still feels like home to me.
yeah.
You know, so there's something that gravitates me to the UK. I love the UK, but then I love to hate it. as well.
yeah, I
You
hate
know
on
what I
it.
mean?
I hate on
I
it.
hate
There's
on
so
it
many
all the
bad
time,
things
but I
that I
love it.
say. Yeah, I mean, we have this conversation with my friends about the education system, and taxes and opportunities available for people, all of these things, right? Who's in power, the government. We have all of these almost like conversations where we do slag off the UK, but at the same time, it's like, it's going to be hard to leave. I feel like I will at some point, but
It doesn't have to be forever.
it doesn't have to
you
be
know?
forever, yeah.
And I feel like the UK, despite what people say, it is good for business.
Yeah.
There's a lot
Good
of
to
good
make your money.
entrepreneurs, clever entrepreneurs. It's a great place to make, great place to make money.
Yeah.
Taxes are unfortunate,
Yeah.
but then if you look at the majority of the world, it's kind of the same.
Yeah.
Like a lot of the places in the US are the same. A lot of places in Europe are the same.
Yeah.
There are some tax havens. Even in Europe, you've got like Lisbon, Portugal. A lot of people are going there, or the UAE. You have Dubai.
Yeah.
But it's not like the UK is different from everywhere else in the world. Oh, that tax. That's life. You're
Yeah.
guaranteed to get taxed.
It's interesting, right? Because another thing about London is I feel like from aesthetics, I don't think there's anywhere else that's better in the world. London. If I think about high-end high-end aesthetic practitioners, I don't know anywhere better in the world than the UK, to be honest. There's spots in America, and I've done a few training sessions out in America as well, so I have a bit of an understanding there. And there's some really good practitioners there, but if we're talking about density, there's so many good practitioners in London, and we feed off each other, right? And I remember someone saying that if you want to be the best, go to a big city and be the best there, because the level of competition there is going to force you to bump up your game. So if you want to be the best in London, it's going to be significantly harder than being the best in Brighton, for example,
Yorkshire.
right? Yorkshire, some smallish community where it's not as competitive, right? So I feel like with London, it's just it's full of high-end level aesthetic practitioners, which will force you to bump up your game. And I feel like a lot of the stuff that we're doing in London, not many places are doing it. There's few techniques, strategies, all of these things that I've seen in primarily in Derma Medical, because we're quite a large team now, that I haven't seen anywhere else. I see certain ways that you treat the under eye area. We've spoken about the under eye area a lot, but it's a tricky area to treat. I haven't seen anywhere in the world, and I follow loads of people in loads of different countries. I have certain ways that we treat the under eye area, even noses, mid face, these type of things. I've not seen it anywhere, so that's another reason that I want to be close to London.
I've got a client in New York, and she said that people in the States love working with people in the UK. I don't know if it's like the accent or the way that medical professionals are taught, but she just said that we have a good reputation for business and for aesthetics in the US. And I feel like even in Dubai, I noticed, because we've got 2 clinics in Dubai as clients.
Okay, wicked.
They like doing business with people in the UK.
Yeah.
They do,
I wonder why that is. Do you think it's, again, don't want to stereotype, but people in the Middle East, they're a little bit more laid back. They're not as savage.
Maybe. I think the UK people are polite. We're so polite.
Okay.
We're like the most polite nation in the world. I notice this when I go on holiday. We like to queue up, and we always say please and thank you. And not every culture's like that. So I think the politeness helps. The accent might help.
Yeah.
London's quite a trusted place for business. I feel when you look at other places of the world, they like to do business with people from London.
Okay.
I don't know is the honest answer. This is just my own personal kind of speculation. What do you think?
Yeah, it's interesting. I feel like people in London work hard.
Yes.
I think that's the thing. If you go to the Middle East, I don't want to slag off the whole Middle East, actually, but let me just rephrase that. You go, okay, I'll talk about my own country. So Pakistan, for example, my family are, I'd say 70% of my family are still in Pakistan. So we go over to Pakistan quite frequently, and I interact with my cousins, my friends in Pakistan, or my uncle's friends, that sort of stuff. And there's definitely a more laid back approach. It's hot during the day. Let's just have an afternoon nap. Okay, you know what? It's really busy in the afternoon, so let's take the morning off. Okay, we need to eat 3-4 times a day, so we're taking big breaks from work, right?
Man,
they're living life, right? They got a really good work-life balance, and I guess partly because they're quite family orientated out there, so there's a lot of time that you have to spend with your family members as well. So not everyone. I mean, my uncle, he's in the army, and I would hate to have his schedule. It's crazy. Very hardworking. But generally speaking, if it's a hot day, shops won't open until after about 3 p.m. once the sun's gone down. So it's a bit more of a relaxed, slow pace. Not everyone, but generally speaking. And I think in London, it's just non-stop. You wake up at 6 a.m. You're in the office at 7, 8. You're there until you can't work anymore. You come back and you do it again.
It's probably because to survive you need to pay
Yeah.
like 4 Gs a month.
Yeah.
You know,
It's
so
not easy to live in
I
London.
think that's a really good point. A lot of people compare New York and London. They
Yeah.
have similarities. You know, it is a hustle culture. We are hard workers for sure.
Yeah.
I think the UK is a great place to earn money.
Yeah.
Dubai is a good place to spend it.
Yeah, I've heard that before.
That's
I
what a
agree
wise
with
man
that.
told me.
Yeah.
So I'd like to finish off by asking you a question to the viewers that might listen to this who are starting out in the aesthetics industry. Maybe they've recently qualified, maybe they're in the building blocks, first couple years, struggling to build that client base. What would your message be to them for them to be successful within the aesthetics industry? What would be your message?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I think you have to spend a lot of time on your skills. When you train to become a surgeon, you spend a decade on the skills themselves. And I think with aesthetics, I think it is easier to be an aesthetic practitioner than it is to be a surgeon, for example. But I think some people have this idea of, oh, I can go to 2 or 3 training courses and within 3 months I'm going to be lip queen or nose king. And it just doesn't happen. You know, good things take time. So I think be patient with yourself. Don't expect to make a lot of money in the first couple of years. Don't even be focused on the money aspect of it. The money will come. But I think really pay attention to you becoming a good aesthetic practitioner. You do have to still spend time on the business element of it. But I think when you first start off, you should spend the majority of your time just getting good at the skill. With Botox, you can learn it relatively quickly. You do 100 people's Botox, you can do everyone's Botox. With dermal fillers, I've done over 8,000 treatments. I'm still learning today. I'm still tweaking little techniques that I do. So with dermal fillers, be patient with yourselves. With Botox, you do 100. You can do anyone's Botox after that, really. But yeah, spend, I'd say, 80 to 90% in the early phases getting good at the skill itself, and then spend maybe 10 to 20% of your time on building a business, building a brand, doing the marketing, website, all of that stuff, client acquisition, really. And eventually it will start to tip. You'll realize, oh, I'm actually getting really good at the aesthetic side. Now I can start spending more and more time doing more marketing, building a business around myself. But in the early phases, definitely focus on being good at the skill, because you can be the best marketer, but if you're crap at the treatments, it doesn't matter. The word's going to get out. All your clients are going to be one-time clients. They're not going to come back to you. But if you nail being good at aesthetics, which is difficult, it's not easy. It can take years to become good at what you do, and it, you know, a lot of trial and error. But if you can nail that, then everything else eventually falls into place. So that is probably my number 1 advice. Number 2 advice, train at Derma Medical, because I'm a trainer there. No, I'm just kidding. But Derma Medical is arguably one of the best training companies on the planet. There's a few others that I think are pretty good. So Acquisition Aesthetics and Interface Aesthetics, who's run by a MaxVac surgeon. I think they're both pretty good training academies. But I don't think anyone's doing it like Derma Medical, to be fair.
Man, doing some big things.
Yeah.
I mean, that's scalability.
Yeah.
You know, Miami, UK, India.
Yeah.
No one else is doing that.
No one
From
else
what I've
doing that.
seen anyway, I could be wrong.
Yeah.
I went to their office last week. Wow, I was blown away.
Yeah.
They're a real prestigious company.
Yeah.
And they're not slowing down. They're going
No.
from strength to strength.
Yeah.
So big up Hamrit, the CEO, actually.
Yeah. Big up, Hamrit.
Medical, Hani, all the rest of the team.
Yeah.
Good guys. Right, so just had an amazing conversation with Haroon. Thank you so much for coming through, mate.
Thank you. Appreciate
Always
that,
a
man.
pleasure.
Likewise.
And of course, I mean, we speak regularly anyway. We've got projects on the go.
That's it.
We're going to have some pretty cool guests on this podcast. We're going to try and do one every single month. The goal is bringing the best minds of the aesthetics industry on a podcast to give value, inspiration, and just some general knowledge in terms of the industry right now. So thank you for listening. If you like it, like, comment, subscribe, follow. What's your Instagram tag, Haroon?
Dr.Haroon Ashraf.
Dr.Haroon Ashraf and Harvey Warrington Media. Samuel Warrington _HW is my IG as well. And thank you for tuning in.